and welcome to Podcash, the portable professional development podcast from Cash. My name's Dawn, and I'm the editor of Cash Alumni, the fastest growing professional network of current and future care and education practitioners. You can join us for free at cashalumni.org.uk and get access to articles from subject specialists, careers advisors, access to job vacancies, and our member benefits scheme. Today I'm really lucky that I got the opportunity to talk to Nick from Fika. I was really rubbish and didn't ask Nick to introduce himself at the beginning of the recording, but that's because he was so interesting that we were already 10 minutes into the conversation before I decided to stop and actually start recording. So I'll let Nick introduce himself at the end.
Quite lucky in that I've had some experience of being stuck in the house before. I used to struggle quite a lot with, I've got a condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, so it's a connective tissue disorder. I dislocate joints quite easily. And I've had a bit of practice at that sort of slow morning bit, because at that point I was working, so my employer supported me to do some stuff from home. And when all of the messaging came out, when we all first started being at home, there was a lot of like, keep your routine, try and make sure that you protect your working day as a separate bit, and that, so that it doesn't bleed into life. And I'm quite pleased that I'd had the experience I'd had before, because actually I knew that wouldn't work for me. I know that if I sit and I block out 8 hours in the middle of the day to do work, that'll quite easily turn into 12 hours, because I get task inertia and I find it very difficult to then switch off from that and move into something else, especially because we don't have that commute to sort of break the day up and have that sort of transition period from one to the other.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Definitely, yeah. No, I mean, I think that time has been really important. The slow down time is something that I think we've experienced as a collective. So, like, speaking of the global community, while there has been clearly we have suffered, human capital loss, and certainly we've also suffered, as a global economy. But there's also been, I think we need to weigh up the fact that there's been, what I like to think of, there's been a moment of contemplation that's happened across, across the globe, and that's quite an important thing. If you think about that, like a great contemplation, we've all had a chance to slow down a little bit, and that's partly because a lot of our external control has been taken away, and the lockdown, and sorry to hear about your situation, and maybe that's prepared you in a little bit for what the rest of us have had to sort of deal with, which is a new routine where our external sense of control has been removed to a certain extent, and that leads us to be quite anxious. Humans aren't very good when control is taken away or perceived control is taken away. And when the lockdown happened, I think initially there was a period of a honeymoon sort of brief period where everyone thought, yeah, it's like, this is very different, right? We're all at home, but then actually what we realize is that our sense of control has been taken away. And I think what that's done is that's helped to encourage an inward look, and there's a psychologist called Julian Rotter who wrote a really important piece of psychological literature around the locus of control, and locus being the Latin for place. So where is the place of your control? And he talks about in his sort of structure and papers that an external place of control is not very positive for your performance as an individual, for your well-being, because you feel like the control is outside of your ability. So you believe that it's other people's fault that things have happened, or you're not in control of the results of your efforts, and it's it becomes quite a challenging perception if you believe that things are outside of your control. Whereas what he talks about, the inward locus of control, if your control is inside, then what you're basically saying is that you're in control of how you feel about the things that you can't control. And that's a really nice way of thinking about controlling the feelings that you have about the things you can't control, and suddenly that brings a bit of peace into your life. And that, I think that concept of contemplation, we've all had that time to look a bit inward, and I think we've certainly seen it in our research that a lot of people have actually questioned things, like reappraised value, what's important to them. We saw very early on that, you know, some of the learners and staff that we were talking to were actually reappraising what they value most and what's important to them, and rethinking potentially careers, rethinking how they spend their time with the people that they love, and, you know, where to spend their time. And so this moment, if you like, of great contemplation, I think has actually forced us all to reflect a little bit more. And reflection is a really important part of positive psychology. It's an important part of nursing practice. It's an important part of many of the skills development systems that we have in place in our country. And actually, reflection is a big thing for Fika as well. We have a platform and a series of programs and courses that we've created, and they're all based on a simple premise, which is a 5-minute exercise format. And we like to think of mental fitness in a similar way to how we all think of physical fitness, in that it's a habit based on a small amount of education to understand it, and then a repeated habit of brief exercises. And so the 5-minute Fika exercise is all comprised of learn, reflect, and act. And those are the 3 components that our academic team, so Dr. Fran, who's our head of psychology, and Dr. Zoe, who's our head of research, have really put together with the support of professors and academics at our various university partners, to really formalize this exercise format. And this learn, reflect, and act, in a way, we've all kind of had a bit of an experience of this, because we've had to relearn certain things. We've had to reflect on, or the time to reflect on the things that matter. And then the next part of that is really action. And I think what's quite interesting, if you kind of think of this as a great contemplation that we've been through, is that actually that's the beginning of behavioral change models. So contemplation is step 2 in many, mainstream sort of psychological behavioral change models. And that's really the step where you decide to reappraise and reevaluate, and then you start to move into the action phases or the preparation and action. So I think a lot of what's happened is we've had a chance, and if you can see it that way, it's about being optimistic about what's happened. Is that we've had a chance to reappraise things. So what we're seeing is, how do we keep the good things that we've learned? And we touched on it early, Dawn, didn't we? With where we were saying that having meetings by video, yes, this can get a bit tiring, and yes, we're all finding more time for meetings, but actually we're letting each other into each other's houses. There's a sense of honesty there. There's a connection that perhaps you wouldn't have in a meeting room environment where it's a bit more formalized. And perhaps that leads to more honest discussion. Perhaps that leads to people feeling a bit more comfortable to contribute, where perhaps they wouldn't feel so comfortable in a meeting room environment. And I think we've certainly seen, with our discussions with all our clients and partners, that we've had some really energized and very fruitful discussions that feel very honest. And I think we're as a company, we're not planning to agree to face-to-face meetings unless it's really important. There's a lot of travel involved, and I think that's an element that we're going to take out. And I think across the board, we're seeing people retain some of the things that they've learned, reflect on why they're important, and put them into action. So it's kind of like everyone has gone through the process of a global Fika exercise in a way.
Yeah, and I think you're right. In that it has given us all not only the opportunity to do that, but sort of the framework to do it, because there's stuff out there, like the stuff that Fika are doing to sort of give people that help to get through this. But it's also given them the tools to do a bit more self-reflection, and to figure out actually what their response is, because we're not all the same, and we do all react differently to different things. And sort of, I think that ability to have a little bit more freedom over how we work and where we work and the way that we present ourselves for work is allowing people to be better at work, because they can, I suppose, put more of themselves into it as well. I know that I've definitely become more honest with myself in terms of accepting my boundaries a little bit more, and accepting the things that maybe I'm not quite as good at negotiating, because now that I'm not in an office full of people who can fill in those gaps for us, I'm having to ask for help with those things, and that's been quite nice, in that I've had that opportunity, to reflect and to sort of work with my own positives and negatives a bit more. But I also think you're right about it being sort of a bigger society thing. I think one of the things that I can see happening is that businesses are retaining some of that flexibility and some of that stuff now that we know it's possible. And I do hope that will have a positive impact on people who have wanted more flexibility for a long time. So for example, people with health conditions that make it difficult for them to travel into an office every day. We now know that it is possible for them to work from home, so I'm hopeful that more employers will make reasonable adjustments to allow that to happen. And parents, flexibility around the times that we work. I'm really lucky in that NCFE and Cash are quite good at looking after staff well-being. So we were sent home before lockdown was an official thing, to work from home, and we were all given the direction not to log our times, so we no longer clock in and clock out of the day. We can work whenever it is most convenient for us, whether that's when the kids are in bed or early in the morning when we get up and we feel a bit lost. And that's been quite nice for those of us who've got jobs that involve a bit of creativity, because actually I feel much more creative at 9:30 at night than I do at 11 o'clock on a Monday morning when I'd usually edit podcasts, because that's when it needs to be done. But actually being able to do that with my feet up on a night time with some candles in that chilled out bit of the night it's a much better place for me in my brain to do that bit of creative work. And I think that we'll see a lot of businesses getting more benefit from people being able to do that. Does that make sense?
It does. It's really interesting that you mentioned that, Dawn, actually, because we had we have a regular Fika daily exercise that's in our global community. So and that changes every day. So there's basically every single day there is a mental fitness exercise in the Fika app, and it's a new challenge each day. And each day people look at that challenge and then they post their responses and solutions to it. And we had a question around your chronotype. So it's exactly about this, what type of how does your body naturally respond at certain times in the day? And there are morning people, afternoon people, and it's about your circadian rhythm and how your brain and sleep-wake cycle works. And I think there's associated animals with this, and we had a little bit of each of the exercises always has a little bit of education. So we had a bit of a description of these, the types of person you are based on being a morning person. So there's wolf, there's bear, there's dolphin, and lion. And basically we asked, we educate people on this, and then we ask them, what's your chronotype and what works for you. And it was just really great to see everyone suggest, associate with, one of the animals, which represents the chronotype. And like for instance, the lions wake up early and do a lot of their stuff in the morning, whereas obviously the wolves are a bit more night animals. And so it was really interesting to see people suggest how and why they operate when they do. And I think that's that's a great thing. And it's it sounds like NCFE and Cash are doing the right thing. It's really great to recognise these human sort of our individuality, if you like, and that's as much about accepting diversity as well, because it's about encouraging people to be themselves. And that's I think that's a really important thing. I think you touched on something really interesting as well. So when we're talking about the societal changes, I think one of the things that we've seen is that's really interesting is that and it's been our mission. I founded this Fika business with Gareth Fryer, who's the other founder of Fika, and we founded the business because we believe that mental fitness is as important as physical fitness. That's like the sort of like the tent pole that we put up, and the banner that we would put up. We would say that's what we would say. We would say it's important. Mental fitness is as important as physical fitness. And it's really interesting to look at what's happened with the lockdown. Is a lot of our physical activities have been taken away, and so what have we done? We've all looked a little bit more at our psychology. We've looked as employers. We've looked at psychological safety and psychological support and remote support for our staff. At universities, we've looked at, well, how do we maintain motivation and connection, and all of the things that actually, it's really, I think this pandemic period has really made us, I think it's shifted that balance a little bit. And I think we've all realized that actually our mental fitness is really important. In fact, you could say that it's almost more important, like the head leads the body. And if your head is in the right place and you've built a level of mental fitness, then you can act better, you can choose better. And I think this is something that we've always been very keen on and very invested in Fika, is this concept of turning that science, and there's huge amounts of science in positive psychology, in CBT, in acceptance and commitment therapy, in all various, in sports psychology. There's a huge amount of science that we have tried to bake into these 5-minute exercises. We believe that mental fitness can be achieved. So things like confidence, connection, focus, and positivity. It has to be said that in our culture in the UK, there have been times where we think you're either confident or you're not, or you're either a positive person or you're not a positive person. And these have just been labels that seem to have been used as binary. You're either or you're not. And it's just not the case. It's just like training to go on a run. Anybody can do a 5K if they train, and within reason.
Yeah, I think recently we've seen that with resilience as well. I see a lot of public discourse about, oh well, he's not very resilient, or oh well, should be a bit more resilient. And I think that there's a fundamental misunderstanding about what resilience actually means. I had a great conversation with some doctors from Oxford University a couple of weeks ago for the podcast actually, and they work on something called the brain story, which is basically teaching people how their brain was built and how that sort of neurology happens, so that they can apply that knowledge of reflecting on why the children that they're working with or the people that they're working with might react in certain ways to certain things. And they talk about resilience being like a set of scales. So you've got positives on one side and negatives on the other. And it's trying to make sure that the positive side always outweighs the negative side, so that you've got that headroom, so there's space for things to go wrong before those scales tip and things get difficult. Would you say that's the sort of approach we would take to that sort of confidence stuff as well, that 100%. It would be a little bit like a set of scales, and that
100%. We spend a lot of time and a lot of secondary evidence and resting on the shoulders of giants, but also 2 years of our own primary evidence to put together what we call the 7 skills of mental fitness. So they are stress, so the management of stress, focus, positivity, connection, confidence, motivation, and meaning. And we like to think about these as muscle groups. So these are just they are skills you develop, but they're muscle groups that you have. They are things that you can work on, and we should think about them in the same way. So this concept of you're either confident or you're not is a complete fallacy. You can train your confidence. You can work on that skill. You can develop that muscle group, and you can get better at confidence. It's a doing thing. What we have been poor at as a culture is we've been very poor at describing the full breadth of mental health. We have focused very much on the reactive side of both services and language for mental health, and what that's done over a period of over generations has really inhibited us from looking at the positive and active side of that health spectrum, and our ability to understand that these skill sets, so these attributes, are things we all have and we can get better at them. And I think this is an essential missing ingredient in across curricula, but more so just across culture. And what we're trying to do with our platform, with our science, and with our, if you like, our public cultural and behavioral change, is we're trying to say you can exercise your mental muscle groups in the same way that you are able to exercise your physical muscle groups, and you can get better at all of these things. And it should be, I think the example you talked about the Oxford and the mind example, it's a great analogy with what we do at Fika as well, because we look at the physical health spectrum, and we're all very acquainted with the process of how that physical health spectrum works towards fitness. It starts with education. So we have physical education. From that physical education, we retain some literacy. And with that literacy, we start to build our own habits, and that forms our level of physical fitness. And we take some control over that at an individual level, because we've been taught, and it's culturally acceptable. And it's also attractive, right? It's been seen, and we've grown this attraction around physical fitness. We just have to do exactly the same thing in mental health, and that's the flag we're flying. We're saying you need a small amount of education around these 7 skills and around mental education. You need to then have some encouragement from services and tools, and to be able to retain some of that literacy and put it into a habitual practice, so that you can also maintain your mental fitness level. And then doing that, what we do is we start to empower individuals to have some of their own control to be able to maintain their fitness level in their mental health. And in doing that, we grow a more healthy population that starts to look at prevention rather than cure. And we think this is it's a huge missing piece in our culture. And it's also, and you'll know this from the work that you guys do at NCFE, it's hugely aligned. These mental skills or meta skills, they're hugely aligned to employability and employment outcomes at our education institutions. So it's not just about well-being, it's about performance and employment. These skill sets are really vital to our education. And this is why we started in the education sector, because we wanted to really embed and understand how curriculums work, how the education system works, and where is the place for this mental education. It's broadly absent in many curriculums. It's broadly so important to students. We did our own independent research last year that was featured in The Guardian. And we found that 96% of all the students that we spoke to wanted to learn about mental education. They wanted it in the curriculum. They wanted to take control of the mental health spectrum and the skill sets within there. They wanted to learn it. We also found that 99% of graduate employers said that those skills would put any student in a much more opportune position for employment. So it would improve their employability. So if mental education and mental fitness is so important, I asked the question, why is it not as important as physical fitness? Why haven't we taken more steps as a country and as a culture to really embed this into curriculum and into lifelong learning across workplace as well?
Yeah, I think that is a really valid question. I think to try and answer that sort of question from an outsider's point of view, I think that in Britain we're particularly rubbish at mental health. We're getting better at it, but I think it does go back sort of to that idea of the stiff upper lip and that not showing your weaknesses, and that idea that we are this strong and silent nation who, and I think we're quite lucky in the younger generations, so in Generation Y and in Generation Z, there has been a little bit more freedom with that sharing. I don't know whether that's because of the age of social media, and there is a lot more what I would call curated imperfection, where people are a little bit more willing to show a little bit more of their flaws online to let people know that it's not just them. Yeah. But there has been this historic distrust of how safe it is to share the negatives or the things that you're struggling with. Do you think that played into the idea that actually we're all fine and we're all just muddling along and it'll all be okay if we just ignore it, it'll go away and we'll feel better?
Yeah, well, you're right, and I think there's a part of the step towards change is about normalization. So we have to have that open discourse. We have to have that discussion, and we have to agree that to a certain extent we're all a bit affected by our health and our performance. And I think there's an interesting here's an interesting way of looking at it. The language has been very bad in mental health over the years, and I think you're right. It stemmed from the stiff upper lip and the deal with it and the get on with it, and this sort of proactive deal with it yourself culture that we've had, which is, I think it's instilled a lot of that into our culture and into our training systems and into our general behavior. And that is changing. You're right. We're starting to be more open. We're realizing that actually strength is being open. Not so much being closed. It's actually sharing is more. Is actually harder and stronger. And I think that you look at the words though. But let's look at language, for instance. If I say the word stress, or if I say the word anxiety, and yes, I've pronounced them, but I almost can feel my hairs moving a little bit when I hear the word anxiety and the word stress. We've made those words terrifying. We're all terrified of stress and we're all terrified of anxiety. And yet, if you take a more physiological look at those words and what they describe, they are part of our amygdala and our limbic nervous system. So when we're stressed, our limbic nervous system is essentially responding to what could be a threat. And so we start to increase our pulse slightly. The amygdala starts to release microhormones. There are neurotransmitters that are, sending out signals in our brain, and basically we're performing. Stress is about performance, and when you look at anxiety is also stems from the limbic nervous system, and actually it's about consideration and planning. It's from our genes and our makeup that has evolved over millennia, where we plan for problems and try to avoid them. So anxiety is a planning system, and stress is a performance system. What if we were to rebrand those words? What if we were to say to young people as they grow up, stress is about performance, anxiety is about planning. So plan and perform your life, and learn how to master those skills, work on them just like you would your biceps, your triceps, or your stretches, or your running capability. And let's really take hold of these words and embrace them. And let's make mental fitness feel attractive. I mean, we like to say, what if in a few years' time we have young people seeking out mental fitness and saying, I want confidence as the new six-pack. That would be a nice place to be, where we're starting to think about mental fitness as being an attractive and an attainment that we're all seeking, and we're working on it in the same way that we have done physical health. It's not a hard thing to look at. When you look at the science behind it, you look at the physiology, we know that there's a huge amount of science and research going on at the moment around how the brain affects your physiology, how those microhormone releases and neurotransmitters, how they start to trigger and mimic actual feelings like gratitude, for instance. And that we have gratitude exercises in the Fika app, and we do them with groups of people as well. And actually, when you practice gratitude, there are some scientific studies now looking into how gratitude boosts the immune system. So let's just think about that for a minute. Being grateful for things and reflecting on that can improve your immune system. So that's and we touched on this before. This concept of reflection, it's a bit alien to a lot of us. We don't really practice reflection. While in some careers like nursing careers and other careers, it's part of the fundamental part of practice. But actually, the physiology that happens when you start to reflect on something you're grateful for, those little microhormone releases and those little neurotransmitters are basically replicating the feeling you had with that grateful moment. So it is doing something to your body. And if that can improve your immune system, suddenly we're saying, well, hold on, this should be an attractive exercise. This should be an attractive culture. And that's really what we at Fika want to try and bring to mental health. We want to say this is an attractive fitness, and we should all get on board, and we can all do it. It's very accessible. You don't have to be down the gym crunching. You can put these 5-minute exercises into your curriculum, into your class, into your routine. It's like brushing your teeth. But it needs cultural change. It needs behavioural change, and we need to improve our language around mental health. We need to not be scared of words like stress and anxiety. We need to embrace them and accept that they are skills, accept that they might be difficult to begin with, but accept that we can win and we can get better at these things.
This isn't necessarily something that we see people doing a lot. But do you think that there's a gender split there? Because as a 30-something-year-old woman, there's loads of stuff on the internet for me, on Instagram. There's loads of accounts and things encouraging us to share more of myself and to be less scared of being me, and to get out of my own way, and to do this sort of reflection and this stuff now, and to take time for me. And self-care is something that women of a certain age get really quite a lot of messaging about, taking time for yourself and doing this sort of stuff. But I don't see anything like that for men. That doesn't seem to be an alternative space. There isn't a huge self-help section of books aimed at men being able to sort out what's going on in their head and deal with their emotions and sort all of that stuff out. I don't know whether that's got anything to do with the sort of statistics we see around men's mental health, and the sort of the higher statistics that we see around male suicide and things like that, because women do have a bit of community and a bit of ability to get that encouragement to do that reflection and that change and that sort of emotional work. Does that ring true?
It does, and I think it's like a lot of things that we experience in our culture. We have to recognize where there is an inequality, and we need to. Then that's the first step, and then we have to contemplate how can we change it, and then we have to put plans and action in place. And I think that this is one of my frustrations with how we have to date dealt with mental health, is that we keep talking about it, and I agree that is the first step, but we have to do something about it. It's action is where change happens. Action is where habit forms, and action is how we encourage new behavior. And you're absolutely right. I mean, if you look at the statistics in the UK, I think in 2018, of all the suicides, 3/4 of them were from men, and that does represent a problem in our society. I mean, obviously we would dream of a society where there are no suicides, but it's sadly a tragedy that we all live with, and it's one of the founding cornerstones of the business. My best friend Ben, my best friend of 30, 32, 33 years, died by suicide, and it was one of the main reasons that I got together with Gareth and we founded the business, because we believe that there is something we haven't done right in our country around educating in mental education, and I think we need to set that straight. I think you're right. There is a bias to female websites and openness to discuss and talk. But I think if it's framed like that all the time, then it becomes seen as a gender description or a gender label. What we're trying to say is it's education, and education is for all. And so what we're advocating is that mental education is something that should be instilled as lifelong learning, whether you're in primary school, secondary school, higher, further education, or in a job, or a graduate, or in work. There should be a level of education, much like the gym culture we have, much like the exercise culture we have, that says we should all be continually educated around mental education, not female, not male, just all of us.
No, I think that is one of the things that Fika do really well when we've been talking about the stuff, and I've been lucky enough to be able to try some of those exercises and do some of that stuff, is that for those of us who are more scientifically minded or who want to sort of understand why something is working, it's really nice to be able to look at stuff and sort of follow the academics of it at the same time as being able to feel the difference. I think one of the things that we've sort of done historically with mental health and with that sort of reflection stuff is it's all a bit airy-fairy and a little bit in that sort of realm of which is magic, that sort of ritual of it, and you're talking about this being part of education and being in schools in the same way that physical education is. I hated PE, I was rubbish at it, but it was important to do it, and we learned a lot about why activity was important and the way that the body works, and
exactly
the stuff that you can use to then inform physical struggles you have later in your life. You know that if you sit around too long, then you're going to start to ache, and this is the mechanism as to why. I think that you're right that actually demystifying the brain and mental health and making it more accessible because people understand it rather than it being this magic unknown is one of the reasons that this is so helpful.
I think there's another the other point that we're trying to bring to this, the area of mental health, is this word fitness. We haven't seen that before in mental health, and I think it's quite we like to think about behavioral change. There are different models of behavioral change, and yes, there's lots of steps in a lot of the psychological models, but there's also that this concept of flicking a switch, which is something that has been, it's something that has been born out of the advertising and creative industries, and it's around proposition building and creating brands, and there's this concept that if you can find something that people relate to, and that you're able to just relate it simply with words, and you can then just flick a switch so that people don't have to really understand the depth of the detail or the science behind it. And that's why we've settled on mental fitness, because you take the word mental health, you take the word health out of the way and put fitness, it suddenly becomes a different thing. It paints an immediate picture in your mind. Mental fitness equals, and this has come from a lot of our early research and focus groups. When you put that word next to it, there's an instant understanding of, okay, it's on me. Number one, it is a journey. It's not a single practice. It's something I will continue with myself. It is something I can work towards, and it's an attractive thing. And I think that is really one of the other things that we're trying to do, and it's why we have some great ambassadors that have been supporting Fika from the world of sports. So Christina Horrigood, who's one of Great Britain's most decorated Olympians and world champions, she has created a course in Fika on vulnerability, and that course is part of our premium and enterprise platform. Greg Bateman, Leicester Tigers prop, has created a course on motivation.
And Sam Murray, Olympic pentathlete, has created a course on happiness.
And Abdul Bahari, a discus Olympian, has created a course with us on balancing your interests and your career. And I think we're trying to make this a cultural change. And these ambassadors have been really supportive. They've created content with us. Those content have become courses that you can work through on the Fika app, and they've been part of our raising of this agenda. And we're going to continue this with our enterprise partners in the workplace, with our education partners. We're going to raise this agenda because it's a national debate. Yeah. We don't believe while it stems from education, it's about our society as a whole. It's about saying, if confidence was the new six-pack, and if better communication was sought after, and if focus and positivity and meaning were things that we were all taught, and there were skills that we could all develop, can you just imagine the better relationships that would be built, the better listeners that we would have? Imagine if 30% of Britain listened more carefully to each other. Just imagine what that would do to take the quarrels down, to develop better understanding, to be able to put yourself in someone else's position, not judge them, and to just listen to what they're saying, to reduce the bias that we have with each other, to reduce all of those things that cause quarrel, that cause fight, that cause argument, that we don't solve because we haven't been taught to listen well. We haven't had the education about communication, one of the 7 skills that we teach. That is huge. That is immense. And if we all had it in the same way that we have PE, in the same way that we, as you mentioned, as I've had as well, if it was, whether we did it or not, the fact that it was there, that it was taught, that it became part of our culture, I think less Ben, my best friend committing suicide, maybe less on those statistics that we see on the male side, maybe less confusion, maybe less divorce, maybe less anger, maybe less fighting, maybe better acceptance of each other, more encouragement for diversity, more inclusion of each other, more acceptance of each other. Your workplace improves because everyone is more confident, is better at their own agenda, is leaving the company if they wish, but on their own terms, and joining new companies, and that is a group benefit that results in a better economy. So it's not just a case of well-being and mental fitness being a good thing for us from a well-being point of view. It's an economic debate as well, and this is why it's so important that our government and the country really takes this seriously and tries to root this into our culture as meaningful change, because our economy and our culture are completely interlinked, and we need to support both of them.
Yeah, there's so much that you said there that I maybe we should have booked more time in. I feel like I could talk to you all day about all of the things that this could sort of touch on and support and grow. But one of the things you said right at the beginning there was about that we've got this idea of switches where we can just turn things on and off, or that things just happen. And then when you were talking about that in terms of mental health, the idea that it's not just and that's gone now, it's something we need to work on, it's something that we need to build, it's something that we need to keep reinforcing. I think that idea is really helpful to people who are struggling, because actually it's not as simple as the internet makes out. You can't just one day not have anxiety anymore. It's a battle, in the same way that people who start exercising need those videos on the internet of people who are really bad at it. It's really intimidating just to look at a video of someone who already has it all sussed and sorted and all the muscles in the right places, because their easy workout is not going to be the same as an easy workout for me. I think that's an important thing to embed within mental health, the idea that it is something that takes some work to get to the point that it becomes easy. I think a lot of people have this idea that some people are just sorted, but that's not true.
Yeah, no, you make a really good point, and just to clarify, the flicking of the switch is an analogy around a concept. So it's not the progress required. It is when you put the word fitness there, you get it. So there's a get it moment, and I think it's really important that we get the concept that we're going to be working on, and I think you put it really well. There's when that switch has been flicked and you think, oh, it's a fitness, that equals I need to work on it, and you're right. And we advocate as well that it's not always going to be easy to reflect, and it's not always going to be easy to put your action or your pledge, because all of our exercises have a pledge or an action, and it's not always going to be easy to do that. But you're right, you nailed it on the head there. It's not an easy journey. Fitness isn't easy, but it's worth it. And this is where the outcomes have to be attractive. And when you mentioned that, it all happens. There's a lot behind it when you get that fitness level. It reminded me of one of my favourite poems, actually, which, if you don't mind, I'll just read you very quickly.
No, not at all.
So it's called Luck. He worked by day and toiled by night. He gave up play and some delight. Dry books he read, new things to learn, and forged ahead, success to earn. He plodded on with faith and pluck, and when he won, they called it luck.
That's brilliant. And I think that's quite a nice place to sort of, if we finish with your poem, I think that the poem's quite a nice thing to end the podcast on. Where can people find Fika if they want to find out more?
So www.fika.community. We are a business that serves B2B, so institutions and workplaces can purchase licenses for Fika to provide for their populations. And if anybody's interested in finding out more from me or would like to have a chat, please reach out. You can find me at nick@fika.community.
And we'll put all of those details in the description as well. So if you're listening to the episode, you can look at the written description for this podcast episode, and those links will be in there to find Nick and Fika. Nick, it's been absolutely lovely talking to you. And again, I could always talk to you all day when we chat. Thank you very much for your time.
And thanks to you at home. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Podcash. Don't forget, for more great content tailored to everyone in the care and education sectors, you can join our membership network, cashalumni.org.uk. It's free to join and you'll get access to articles from subject specialists, careers advice, job vacancies, and our member benefits scheme. If you'd like to feature on a future episode of Podcash, please get in touch with us through the contact details on the Cash Alumni website. Until next time, take care.